Hey, e-commerce marketing podcast listener. Are you looking to increase traffic and sales to your website? You can do this by launching your own affiliate program. Just visit getosi.com and sign up for a free trial today. That's getosi.com. Welcome back to the e-commerce marketing podcast, everyone. I am your host, Arlen Robinson, and today we've got a very special guest, Jeffrey Sass, who is the CMO and author of Everything I Know About Business and Marketing I Learned from the Toxic Avenger. That is quite a title. Welcome to the podcast, Jeffrey.
Thanks, Arlen. It's a pleasure to be here. Thank you.
I appreciate it. And, today we're really excited. I'm really excited to talk to you about using different domain extensions to leverage and bring traffic to your website. But of course, before we get into that, I definitely want you to tell us a little bit about your background and specifically the book you wrote and how you came up with that title.
Absolutely. So I've had a long and winding road career, which is the nice way of saying I'm older. So I've been in a number of different industries, and I've been very fortunate to have a lot of fun along the way. I started my career in New York in the film and television industry, in the entertainment industry, and that was the genesis for the book, which I'll talk about a little bit later. But I was really interested in the convergence of traditional entertainment with interactive entertainment, kind of in the early days, the early 90s, and ended up leaving traditional entertainment, moving down to Florida to work in the video and computer game industry. So I spent a number of years working on the early CD-ROM games and early computer games, and had the chance to work with William Shatner on his Tech War game, a Star Trek fan, which was a lot of fun.
Okay.
And from the game industry, ended up becoming sort of a tech entrepreneur down here in Florida, and started a couple of companies in mobile commerce and some other areas, and did a stint with a startup in the music space at the heyday of ringtones. That was a company called Mixer, MYXER,
okay.
And was one of the leading places where people went for their ringtones when ringtones were a thing before the smartphone took over the universe. And then for the past 6 years, I've been CMO of .club domains. .club is one of the new top-level domain extensions. So instead of a web address ending in .com or .net or .biz, you can get one that ends in .club. And there are a lot of great applications for the name because club is all about community and passion, and we'll talk more about that. And some really interesting things going on in the domain world with all of these new extensions. The club is one of almost 1,000 new domain extensions that are now available, and many of them have very specific meaning, which gives you a lot of other opportunities. And in addition to .club, we run a little startup incubator here in Fort Lauderdale, Florida called Startups.club, and we're actually doing a little 10-episode documentary series about the startups and Startups.club. So we've got a lot going on. And the book you mentioned, yes, it's a long title, but earlier in my career, I spent 7 years working for the low-budget film studio Troma. Some of you may have heard of Troma from The Toxic Avenger and Classic Nukem High and other wild and crazy movies. And we also had a cartoon series in 1990 called The Toxic Crusaders. And the book is really focused on marketing lessons I learned from making these wild and crazy low-budget films. So they're legitimate business lessons that you could apply to any industry, but they're wrapped around these crazy behind-the-scenes stories making these movies. So it's a very fun and funny book. It's definitely not your typical business or marketing book.
Okay, great. Well, yeah, Jeffrey, you've definitely done a lot for sure, and I appreciate the telling us about what you've been up to, over the years for sure. And I did get recently a copy of your book that I'm so excited to kind of dive into it because the title definitely caught me, and then even the cover of it. I know you had quite a time working with those that studio and on the sets of some of those movies. I can imagine that was quite interesting.
Yep, but really great lessons, that I've used to this day, 20 some odd years later, and I still apply a lot of those lessons to the work I do today.
Okay, yeah, that's awesome. Yeah, it's a lot of things that I've learned early on are lessons that I apply now. So it's always good to be able to to pull from experiences in the past for sure. Well, one of the things, of course, that you mentioned is that you are working with .club domains, and you are the CMO there at .club domains. And for those listeners that are that are out there that are listening, and most people are aware of the fact that there are a lot of different domain extensions that are out there these days, from the .clubs to the .bizes, the info. I mean, just on and on. There's so many these days. I can barely keep up with the amount of extensions that are available that definitely are unique and stand out. And so there's, more than just the .coms, the .nets, and the .orgs. So, one of the things that you brought to my attention is that businesses these days can come up with a memorable domain and help drive traffic to their main website by just coming up with a memorable, catchy domain. And so I wanted to see, my first question is really, how really effective is this, and really kind of what stats are out there that support this?
Yeah, so it's really important to have a domain name that's easy for people to remember. And I think it's really important for your domain name to be spelled correctly. I'm not a big fan of made up words. Sometimes a young company or a startup thinks they can't get, the keyword or the matching name of their company with the .com. So they go make up some word, or they deliberately misspell some word. And that's going to be very detrimental, because it's hard to build a brand around something that doesn't exist as a real word or is hard to spell. You can do it, and it can be done. And of course, you got companies like Yahoo and Google with, made up words, but they've spent literally tens, if not hundreds of millions of dollars to build those brands on top of those unusual names. The flip side is, if you have a strong domain name that's memorable and means something and is spelled correctly, it's much easier for people to find you. It performs much better in search organically. I went to a conference once, I think it was TechCrunch Disrupt in San Francisco, and there were two different companies on display, having booths there, named Safe.com, right? Okay. One was spelled SAYFE. The other one was spelled SAIFE.
Oh, wow.
And all of the promotion that they were doing, guess who was going to benefit from all their promotion? And anyone who heard about Safe.com, guess where they were going to go?
The SAFE.com.
Exactly, to the company that owns Safe.com.
Yeah.
So now you don't have to misspell things. You have all these extensions, so you can pick something that makes sense for your companies. You can pick a .club if you're about community and membership. If you're a subscription model company, club makes perfect sense as your extension. So get something that is spelled correctly and is easy to remember to the left of the dot, and get a word that makes sense for your business to the right of the dot. There's a .agency if you're an agency. There's .law if you're a lawyer. So these things are relevant, and when a domain name is relevant and the content is relevant, it performs very well in organic search, and even your paid search is going to perform more efficiently. So you'll spend less money for the same results. And it doesn't have to be your primary web address. You can use these creative domains for redirects and marketing purposes, as you mentioned, Arlen, to drive traffic to your main website, even if it's not the same URL.
Right.
Take my book as an example. So it's a long title, as you pointed out. Everything I know about business and marketing I learned from the Toxic Avenger. Well, I want people to go to Amazon.com and buy my book. I don't want them to have to remember my name or the book's name and search for me, because then there's search results that might distract them. They might see a different book that they want instead of mine. Right. I want them to go to my book's page directly. So I registered the domain name toxicavenger.marketing. It's part of the title of the book. It's relevant to the book's title. It's easy to remember. And then I use that domain in all of my marketing for the book. And that domain simply redirects to my book's page on Amazon.com. So if you go to toxicavenger.marketing, you're literally one click away from buying the book instead of going to Amazon, searching, etc. And you can do that for your Facebook page. We have a lot of people who are using custom domains now to redirect to their Facebook page or to their LinkedIn page, anywhere you want to make sure people get to the right destination. And more importantly, you're controlling that audience. You're training people to go to a domain name that you control, as opposed to training them to go to a third-party platform and search for you.
Yeah, that is so right. And when you mentioned coming up with using one of these unique extensions rather than, like you said in the example of the safe.com one, I talk to business owners all the time, e-commerce business owners, and I've encountered some businesses that, wow, I mean, it would just be amazing. It's so amazing the domains they come up with, that they're really so long, and I'm just thinking in the back of my head, wow, I mean, it's just, I would never remember that. I would never remember how to spell that, and it's just, it could be, and it could be a nightmare. And it's just like, what do you do? A lot of companies, they've invested a lot into that. But like you said, you can always get one of these additional auxiliary domains and just point to your main website. And you don't necessarily have to change all of your branding, but it's just another avenue, another way, especially for promotion, on social media and what have you, for you to use these other domains. So I think that's very effective.
Yeah. And as shortcuts, you can use them too as shortcuts to deep links within your website, because there are domains. So for example, .club is about your community. There's .shop. So if you have an online store, you could use a .shop or a .store and have that go directly to your store instead of people having to dig for it. Right. A good example is the watch company Swatch, right? Okay. So they actually have a Swatch Club, but the Swatch Club is deep within, their website. They have a great section of content around their club. So they use swatch.club as a shortcut right to the section of their website that's all about Swatch Club. So if they want to drive traffic or membership to the club, instead of having people go to swatch.com and try to find the link to the club, they can go to swatch.club and get right there. And then if they're doing a promotion specifically for their Swatch Club, the .club domain name is the domain they can use, and it makes it much easier to get traffic there. So you can think of these domains as shortcuts as well. Right.
Yeah, and I appreciate you pointing out that example, because I am always one to tell people that, they're looking at different marketing ideas and things to look at what some of the big guys are doing. And you mentioned Swatch is a great example, because, these companies are nothing, their budgets are nothing to sneeze at, because they've invested a lot into coming up with strategic marketing plans, and there's a lot of money behind it. A lot of people, sitting in conference rooms deciding about what to do. And if they're doing it, then, there's a reason behind that. That means that the statistics support it, and that means that it's something that 9 times out of 10 is going to be effective. So yeah, I appreciate that example. And that's something that you definitely want to always look at what some of the big guys are doing. Now, there's a lot of people out there that are listening. Everybody these days is really kind of focused on SEO, search engine optimization, and there's so many books out there. There's so many blogs and podcasts and what have you about search engine optimization. So I know there's people thinking, okay, what are these personalized domains, or how do these personalized domains ultimately affect my search engine optimization? Is it going to have a positive effect, and if so, how?
Yeah, so it's a great question, and obviously SEO is very important, and it's a challenging thing because the rules are always changing. According to Google, their official statements are that all extensions are treated equally. In other words, there's no advantage nor disadvantage to using an alternative domain name extension, that they're all pretty much treated the same. However, there have been a few studies to show that because it's not just a domain name, but it's the relevance of the phrase and how it potentially matches the search term, that when you have a domain where the words to the left of the dot and the words to the right of the dot or the extension together make something that matches the search term, those names perform very well organically. So, for example, Coffee Club. There's a company called coffee.club. Okay. If you search for coffee space club, coffee.club is typically in the first few organic results, and that was without any, special SEO handling. And we've seen that happen again and again with .club domains where it's a common phrase, coffee club, soap.club, all those things will perform extremely well. And not just with .club, with other extensions too, when the content is relevant and the domain name matches. Recently, there was a very high profile sale of the name vacation.rentals. It sold for $500,000, which is a very high price for one of the new domains. But when you think about it, vacation rentals is one of the top search terms on Google. Mm-hmm. So the domain name itself, vacation.rentals, is an exact match for that term. And the owners of the name who launched a business on it have been reporting, tremendously positive results since they launched with that name. So there's an opportunity to create a domain name where the domain name itself matches the search term you're going after, and therefore organically it's going to perform very well.
Yeah, that's a good example, the vacation.rental. I wasn't aware of that, but that's a lot of money for a domain, $500,000 for sure. And so that sorry, go ahead. Oh no, so that just really goes to show the power of these, and really, the people that of course invested in that, they really know what time it is for sure.
And another thing that's interesting, Arlen, and it's almost too soon for there to be a lot of data on it yet, but it's definitely the future, and that's voice search, right?
Okay.
How many of us are now talking into our phones? We're talking into devices in our homes, whether it's Alexa or Google Assistant or whatever you might have, but you're starting to search with your voice. And that's another reason where getting a domain that is spelt correctly, that has dictionary words in it and not made up words in it, is going to be very important. Because if I say out loud to whatever device I say, tell me something from safe.club, to go back to that, safe.com, to go back to that example, it's not going to go by voice to one of these misspelled places. It's going to go to the site that's spelled correctly. So when it comes to voice search in the future, you want a domain name that is going to be easy to be understood by a machine, by a machine, essentially, right? So I think that the power of having domains that make sense, that are semantically correct, is going to increase over time, partially because of the continued growth of voice search.
Yeah, that is so true, because right now we're really kind of at the infancy of the voice search. And these devices, the Alexas and the Siris, they're not perfect. And so, I know you've probably had experiences, I know I have, with both Amazon Alexa and the Siri, where it doesn't recognize what you say. And, especially if you're mentioning a brand or a particular website, these types of extensions can definitely help for sure. Which brings me to my next question. From what you see, as far as what we have right now, do you see that there's really a big growth opportunity into the creation of these new extensions? I mean, is this really going to be just kind of endless? Is there going to be extensions for just kind of every industry and every niche? Where do you see this going?
That's a great question, Arlen, and really it's actually it's a regulated space. Right. So the only reason we were able to apply for .club going back 6 years ago now is that ICANN, which is the organization that manages the DNS and manages the internet namespace, they opened up an opportunity back in 2011 where anyone could have applied for anything. So you could have applied for .arlen, for example, if you wanted to. All you had to do was pay the $185,000 application fee.
Wow.
and then that window of opportunity closed in January of 2012.
Okay.
So after that date, you could not apply anymore. And then they had Reveal Day, where they revealed all the applications. And if you were the only one who had applied for .arlen, for example, and your application was approved, then you would become the registry operator for .arlen.
Gotcha.
But if multiple people had also applied for .arlen, then you would have to compete with them. So when we applied for .club, 2 other companies also applied for .club. Okay. And we spent over a year and literally millions of dollars to eventually get the rights to the name by going into an auction with those 2 other companies. And then we won the name in that private auction with those 2 other applicants for .club.
Okay.
So right now, as we sit here today, the window of opportunity is closed. You cannot go out and apply for a new domain name, a new domain extension today. There are some that were already approved that are for sale. So you could, as an entrepreneur, go out and possibly buy an existing approved extension. But the window for opportunity for new extensions to be applied for is still in debate with ICANN. And if it happens, it probably won't happen until 2020 or possibly later. So at the moment, there's not an opportunity, which is too bad, because the other side of this are brands. And a lot of clever brands, over 600 of them, applied for their brand name as a domain extension. Right. I use even Swatch, who I mentioned earlier, they also own and use .swatch. So they have some sites set up with .swatch. Okay. If you go to Canon, the camera company, Canon switched over and uses .canon as their primary domain extension. Their website now is global.canon. If you go to canon.com, it actually redirects you to global.canon. Okay. Other brands are using it, very intelligently, like Audi, for example, .audi. If you go to tt.audi, you'll see a website for the Audi TT model. So that's a logical use of the domain. And the advantage for brands is big, because it gives a level of authority that otherwise consumers might not have. So for example, if I want to buy sneakers and I see there's some website called myfavoritenikes.com or whatever, I don't know if that's actually Nike or if that's someone who's just a Nike reseller or someone who just made up that name and is using it without authority to sell me what could be real or not real Nike sneakers. On the other hand, if I go to running.nike, and it's running shoes and it's on a .nike domain, I know that only Nike can have that. Only the brand can have their own name. So it gives me a sense of trust and it gives them a sense of authority for that domain name that didn't exist before. So for brands, it's a very powerful thing to have your own brand as a domain extension.
Yeah, I can definitely see that. And I appreciate that history of it, because I wasn't really aware of that it was just opened up in 2012 and it's closed down for now. So it seems like all of the major brands, of course, that could afford the $185,000 price tag to get an extension, they just jumped in there and signed up for their own extension, and that's what's out here today. Like you said, the Audis and the Canons and all of the other companies. So that makes sense. So yeah, I'm really curious whether they will open it up again, and will it just the floodgates be open, and will all of the other companies that didn't get a chance jump in there? And it'll be interesting. I'm curious as to whether that's going to happen or not.
Yeah, a lot of the brands that missed out, that didn't apply when they had the opportunity to, are lobbying for the right to apply now. I know Twitter, for example, is one company that, made a lot of noise that they didn't apply then and they want to apply now.
Okay.
And it's, the other thing is a lot of big brands are doing interesting things with domains too, because you have all these different extensions. So Google, for example, applied for, I think, over 100 different extensions at the beginning. And not just .google, but also different Google brands. And they also own some, like they own .new, N-E-W. And what Google's just launched with .new is a very clever and interesting use of a domain name, is that if you use Google's Google Drive services like Google Docs or Google Sheets, if you want to open up a new Google Doc or a new Google Sheet or a new Google form, you just have to type .new and it'll open up a new doc from you. Just go into your browser and type doc.new, and as long as you're logged into your Google account, it recognizes that as the command to just open up a new Google Doc or a Google spreadsheet.
Oh, wow.
So it's a really clever shortcut using one of the new domain extensions. So there's a lot of innovation, happening around domain names that go beyond just the typical use of domains too.
Yeah, that's interesting. And I was not aware of the .new, and because I'm a huge Google Docs advocate and Google Sheets advocate, but we've been using it internally in our company here, OmniStar, for quite a while now. And yeah, that shortcut is that's powerful. Yeah, that's an interesting way to do it, because I'm creating docs all the time, and that's definitely a good shortcut. So I'll definitely keep that in mind. I appreciate that. Now, I always like to look at the good and the bad, the pros and the cons to anything, any marketing tactic or strategy. So I'm just wondering, in your experience or in your opinion, is there any downside to doing a highly personalized domain, that a company can do? What do you think?
Well, I think that the downsides are, potential downsides, I should say, if you are switching domains. So let's say you have a long domain that you don't really like, and now there's an opportunity to get a shorter, better domain with one of the new extensions, and you decide you want to really rebrand and switch your company. You have to make sure you do that properly. There's a right way and a wrong way, and this is true switching any domain, whether you're switching from a .com to another .com or from something to a new extension. There's steps that you have to take to do it properly so that you don't lose any of your SEO juice that you've built up and your authority for all the years you've operated the other domain. So there's a right way and a wrong way to do it. So obviously you want to make sure you do that the right way so that you don't lose any of your traffic or lose any of your search authority, etc. So that's important to make sure you do it properly. I mean, other potential downsides, not to harp on negative, it's not really a negative thing, but like anything new, you might have to, work harder to drive traffic to a new domain that you haven't used before, draw attention to it. But there are many downsides to domains, and as compared to other marketing programs, getting a good domain name for a campaign and to market is something that lasts forever.
Right.
It's not limited. It's not like an ad spend where you have a budget, you spend the budget, and the campaign is done and over, and you either succeeded or you failed. And that's that. It's gone. With a domain name, you can get a clever domain for a campaign. You could use it for the campaign, and the domain still exists. You could continue to use it. You could actually sell it to someone else in the future. It's an actual tangible asset, if you decide you're not using it anymore. And a lot of companies actually, build up domain portfolios over their lifetime for different projects, and then eventually end up selling them because they realize, well, we're not doing that business anymore, or we're not using this with that product. We sunrise that product, so we don't really need that product's name's domain anymore, and it's an asset you can sell. So there's not many other marketing tools that actually become assets of value that you could repurpose, reuse, or resell later on. So there are advantages to it.
Yeah, I'm glad you mentioned that. It is definitely a bona fide asset, and that's something that I don't only know too well with our company. Before we started recording, I was telling you about, we had our own suite of web products several years ago, and we actually had individual sites for all of those products, which we've since discontinued. But most of those domains, because of the age of them, we decided not to just let those go. We've held on to all of those domains, and we've actually done other things with them and redirected them to other informational sites and other marketing vehicles. So yeah, I would highly recommend it, or anybody listening, if you got a domain, definitely hold on to it, especially if it's aged, and even if you're not using it, you just never know. You could either start another venture or even sell it, and it's always an asset. It's almost like real estate, actually, in a way. Real estate for the internet, for sure.
Absolutely. Virtual real estate. A lot of people like to refer to it as virtual real estate.
Yeah, exactly. I like that term. Well, yeah, great, Jeffrey. I really appreciate you coming on. We never really talked too much about this particular marketing strategy and vehicle, but I know it's really starting to take off these days. So I'm seeing more and more of these different unique extensions and these personalized domains. And you've kind of got my wheels turning as well. So I'm starting to think about some personalized domains that we can come up with for our company, because we've got a lot of things going on and planned for 2019 coming up.
And Arlen, I know you're focused on e-commerce. We've seen e-commerce with .club specifically. We've seen a lot of different types of e-commerce businesses effectively using a .club domain, because when you think about it, especially with the popularity of subscription boxes now and membership programs, if you have an online store, an online business, your customers are your community, your customers are your club. So you want to grow that community and build it, and a .club name works very well for that. We've seen a lot of vacation rentals, the VRBOs, using a .club, again, because they're building a community around their property. And what's interesting is when you brand your name that way, it changes how you think about it. So if you use .club, for example, you might start thinking to yourself, well, what else can I do to give my customers more of a clubby feel? What can I do to give them a sense of exclusivity, a sense of importance? So the extension you choose can help shape how you approach your business too.
Right. Yeah, that is so true, for sure. And the .club definitely, like you said, lends well to a community. So there's a lot of different ways that can be used. Well, lately I've been kind of switching gears at the very end of the recording here and been asking my guests, one final closing question, which is, what is one thing that our audience would actually be surprised to know about you?
Okay, well, it was already a surprise that I worked for Troma for 7 years, making these wild and crazy movies. So I can't use that one. Right. But I will say, because we're recording this in early December, so we're not too far past Thanksgiving, I will say that 3 times in my life I had the opportunity to walk wearing a costume in the Macy's Thanksgiving Day parade in New York. Wow. And that is a wild experience to be walking down Fifth Avenue with hundreds of thousands of people and on either side of you. And of course, they have no idea who you are because you're wearing a costume.
Right.
But it's a lot of fun.
Okay, that's awesome. Yeah, I know that there's not a lot of people that can say they've done that, and especially 3 different times. I know that was quite an experience, and I know the one that came this past year, it was one of the coldest. So, it's
fortunately inside those costumes, it gets pretty hot pretty fast. So the weather's not an issue. Right.
Yeah, that is true. I can imagine. Well, Jeffrey, I definitely want to thank you for coming on to the e-commerce marketing podcast and lending your expertise and your knowledge. Is definitely going to go a long way for sure. Now, if our listeners want to get in touch with you, what is the best way for them to do it?
Well, of course, if you're interested in .club, our website is www.get.club. CLUB, of course. You can find me at jeffreysass.com or jeffreysass.club. They both work. If you want more information about the book, you can visit toxicavenger.marketing, which will take you right to the book on Amazon, as I mentioned earlier. On Twitter, I'm at Sass, S-A-S-S, all S's like Sam. And you can just Google me. I'm pretty easy to find. I've been online for a long time.
All right. Sounds awesome. Thanks a lot, Jeffrey, for joining us again. And we appreciate everything that you've provided to us.
Thanks, Arlen, and thanks so much for having me.
Thank you for listening to the e-commerce marketing podcast. You need to get more feedback and reviews from your customers and improve your customer retention? We have made it easy to do all of this with our advanced customer feedback software. Just visit getosi.com/feedback and sign up for a free trial today. That's getosi.com/feedback.